Okay, so I'm live with a new series I'm going to do, which is assimilating AWS by writing code. And the idea here is that I want to build actual code that you use to automate AWS, use solutions with AWS, and I'll probably mostly do Python, but I think I'll dive into other languages too, like .NET. And the idea here is to build, I don't know, maybe 50 hours of content, 100 hours of content with very specific things that cover solutions in code. So to get started here, I think a good place to go would be to have me share my screen. Let's go ahead and get started here. And let's take a look at this repo that I have here, which is a repo that I've built this weekend that talks about some of the things you can do in Python. And in particular, one of the things that I did was build out a transcribing system, also built out a Lambda manager system. I built a lot of tools that I was able to actually use to solve particular problems that I have on AWS. And let's go to my AWS account first. Take a look at it. I go in here. I'm going to go ahead and auth real quick. And we go. One of the big problems with AWS when you first get started with it is that you start to get like resources that are just straggling and kind of you need to clean things up. And I would say one of the more common problems to solve with AWS initially is, how do you actually manage your buckets? I think there's a limit of 100 buckets, for example, on AWS. And also one of the problems with buckets is sometimes you have empty buckets. Sometimes there's buckets that have like weird artifacts. Sometimes they have weird names. So I think the great places to start when you're building a tool set for AWS is to have something that can help you interface with AWS buckets. And so in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my environment here. In this case, I'm using GitHub, and I've actually set up something called GitHub Codespaces. And I would say for most people now doing AWS, I think you should seriously consider having some component using Codespaces, and I'll show you why. So let's take a look at a couple things. So one, if we go to settings right here, notice what we can do. If I go over to secrets and I go to Codespaces, I can set up secrets here. I also can set up secrets and actions, meaning that I could deploy my code programmatically using GitHub Codespaces. So not only can I develop with it by putting my keys here, but I also can do continuous delivery. So I'm going to start off with this first, and notice that I have set up here 3 things inside that an AWS developer that uses Python should have, or even the CLI, which is I have the AWS access key ID, I have a default region set, and I also have set up an AWS secret access key. And so these are all things. If we go to Bodo 3 here, and we go to Python, and we look at the quick start, inside of the quick start here, they'll give you these same kinds of things. They'll say you need to install Python, and you need to actually have your configuration where you have the AWS access key somewhere set, either locally, or I think even better is you export it into your environment. And so that's what I did by setting this up. Once I've done that, what I can do here is I can actually set up a code space, and we can take a look at this, where I've actually customized that code space with a Docker container file. In this case, notice here that I'm using a version of Python, a 3.10 variant here. And I also have a couple different packages that I've installed. I think I have just one actually, which I've told this particular Docker container to install Vim. And then if we go to dev-container.json, notice here that I've set up some other configuration properties. In this case, I have Copilot, which I'm using to write code for help me to write code, and I have some other tools and extensions. And then finally, I have a command here that basically sources a virtual environment automatically for me. So this is my environment here. And if you want to fork this yourself, you can just go to NOGIBJJ, Assimilate AWS, and you can just fork this repo and get started. Now I'm going to click on this code button here, and I'm going to go to your code space right here. Now, if I select this and I go to this code space, it's going to launch this environment for me. And then I can actually start writing code using this cloud-based development environment. So I think one of the things that maybe I'll show as this is starting up is like, basically, why am I doing this? Like, what's the point of me doing this? And so the point of this, go to data engineering here, is that the cloud itself is in fact a great place to develop code for these reasons. One is that when you're in a cloud-based environment, you don't have to worry about the non-deterministic things that happen on your laptop, like who knows what's installed. You also don't need to worry about the cost, and also you don't have to worry about the problem of your laptop being a different environment. Likewise, if you're in something like code spaces, you can integrate with GitHub Actions, you can integrate with GitHub Copilot, you can integrate with the OpenAI codex, which helps me write software, and the environment is preloaded with things. It's powerful. It's got all this stuff set up, and even these cloud-based environments like Cloud9, which eventually I'll get to here, also have a lot of tools installed. So in this particular environment, I've actually already preloaded it, configured it, and if we go over to this section here, you can see here's my customized environment. We'll take a look at some of the things I've got installed here. You can see that I have some things installed on the left here, like Kubernetes, Terraform, Docker, all that kind of stuff. And I've also customized this so I have a color theme that looks good for people. But the big takeaway here is that I can actually write tools very, very quickly by using the advanced Copilot ecosystem. And so how would I do this? Well, I think a good place to start would be to figure out a type of tool. In this case, we'll call manage S3 tools. So I'll go ahead and write a Python script. And if I go over to this directory here and I go to manage S3 tools, this is where I could start to write tools that manage S3. So the first thing that we'll need to do is make sure that in my requirements file that I've got Boto 3 loaded, which I do. And so now that I've got Boto 3 loaded, I can go into this environment here and import it. So we can say import Boto 3. And then the next step would be to start to figure out what it is I want to write. So as I mentioned, I think this is one of the more common problems that you'll need to address when you use AWS. And so what I want to do is I want to build a series of functions that help me manage S3. And so what I'll do is I'll first write a function that counts the amount of buckets that I have. So we can actually use Copilot to help us out. So we can say write a function that counts the total number of buckets in my account. Right? That would be a useful thing to know how to do. And so here we go. It's going to actually give me a prompt. And because it's got a training library of all the different things available to it, it can give me a good starting point. And I go through here and we can just read through it. So it says create a S3 client. There we go. And we can say get a list of buckets. There we go. There's a list of buckets. Get the number of buckets and then say print. This is the number of buckets. And I think, in fact, in this case, this is where it pays to be an expert, is that what I want to do is tweak this code a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to return the number of buckets. Okay, so not only do I want to print it, I want to return it. And I can actually clean up the code a little bit as well. And we can put some documentation here, count the number of buckets, right? And then what I can do is I can actually even test this code out by using some other tools that will assist my AI assistant. What I would recommend is two tools. I would recommend linting your code and formatting it whenever you use an AI assistant. So I'll go through here and I'll say make lint, and we'll go ahead and check our code to make sure that it's good code. So great, all of our code is actually high quality, and we can see how I do this. So if I go to the make file, I added a lint section right here, and it says pylint. Basically, don't give me very crazy warnings here. Just show me warnings that are standard warnings and also errors. So it's code that's not executable, and ignore the test files because I don't care about those. But give me everything that's a Python file. And then the other thing is, look, I have a format, so I use a Python black tool. And what this will do is it'll actually also help me as I'm using AI. It'll clean up the code a little bit. And then I would say the other tool that I think is a really good tool to use as you're building out, a whole series of tools would be to actually use Ipython. And so in this environment here, I'm going to use Ipython, and I'm going to invoke my code so that I can actually test out the tools that I'm developing. So first up, what I'll do is I'll say from manage tools, import count buckets like this. Then all I have to do is just test out the thing I just built, right? So I just go through here and I say, results here, and I say equals count buckets like this. There we go. And we say you have 51 buckets in your account. And look, if I just say result itself, we also have the result is actually returned as well. So this is a nice start, right? This is a nice start for the utility that I'm going to try to create, because I want to create a command line tool that will let me do all kinds of things in my account and manage S3 for me. So great. So the next thing that I'll do here is I'll put some documentation and even set it up so that I can run it as a script. So first up, I'll add a shebang line, which allows us to basically use Python itself as an executable. And then I'll also put some documentation inside that at the very top that just explains. So like, this is a command line tool to manage S3 buckets. There you go. That's exactly what it is. And we haven't built the command line tool yet, but it's going to eventually turn into it. And then I also, when I'm going to set this up, as I'm going to make it executable. So we say manage S3 tool. So now it's essentially set up so that I can start to turn it into a command line tool. So the next thing that I would recommend would be to use a command line tool library. And we're going to use Click. And now what's great about Click is it can create subcommands. And so I can actually have lots of subcommands that do certain activities. And this is what makes it so powerful. So I can say here, create a Click group. And so what a Click group will allow me to create tons of different subcommands. And so here we go. We'll say Click group. There it is. And it will exactly. We want a tool that'll help us manage buckets. And then the first thing that we'll want to do is we want to create a Click subcommand. And so in this case, we'll create a command called count, and inside of here we do this. It says count the number of buckets in the account. That's exactly what we want to build, and it will just go through and it'll run that command. Now, one of the cool things about using OpenAI to code is that this is going to be the help message, and so I can even ask OpenAI to do more, like give me more things. And so what we can say is we can tell it to help us give an example of how this would be invoked. That's exactly what we would want to do. Now, in my case, because I've made it executable, this is all you have to do is say dot slash manage S3 tools counts. And we can say like uh, uh, this above command will print like this. There we go. And then you have 2 buckets in your account. And so there you go. Perfect. So this is exactly what I want to build. So now I will want to invoke this. And so what I need to do is say if under name is equal to main, and this will build out a CLI. And then from here, we can actually do this. We can say manage AWS S3 tools, and I can run the help menu. And this will go through and says manage S3 buckets is the name of the main tool. But look, there's a command right here, which we can see here. It counts the number of buckets in the account. Okay, well, let's try that. So let's go through here and we'll go to the sub command. And if we go to the end and we run help, it says the subcommands help. It says count the number of buckets in an account, example dot slash manage S3 tools count. The above command will print the number of buckets in an account like this. You have 2 buckets in your account. Okay, let's do it. So if I go through here and I run this tool, there we go. You have 51 buckets in your account. So pretty cool how quickly I was able to build a useful utility. But would make it even more useful is to actually go through and build more functionality so that I can build a whole list of different things that I would do with my account. So how would I do this? Well, you just keep doing what I was doing before. And so this should be pretty easy, is that what I can do is I can actually build another tool that finds the empty buckets. So create a function that finds all empty buckets in my account, right? Because if you think about it, like, why do you have an empty bucket? Probably it was a mistake, or you didn't mean it. Like, you created it at one point, and then now you don't want it to be empty. There's not a many good reasons to have an empty bucket. So why don't we find a tool that will show us what's going on? So here we go. Let's go can find empty buckets, and even we can put some help, some help menu here, find all the empty buckets in account. And we can ask again our friend here, OpenAI, to help us out. And we see, oh, look, create an empty bucket. Now, when you're using AI to help you program, it's always a good idea to spot check. You can't just blindly accept that it knows what it's doing. It might, but it's a good idea to spot check it. So I'm going to go through and read this and say, okay, create an S3 client. That looks good. Get a list of buckets. That looks good. Get the number of buckets. Now this I don't think we care about, because this is not this is actually not what I want, because we already have an empty buckets list here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to tweak it. And then I can just say for bucket in response, buckets, get the name of the bucket, get the number of the objects in the buckets. And then if the number of objects is 0, print the name of the bucket. Yeah, this looks good. This is more like what I would want. And then we would return. And now what we would need here is find all empty buckets. We need to tweak this a little bit. I don't like what the AI gave me, so I'm going to change it. So I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna tweak everything, and I'm gonna just start over again. And I'm gonna say create a function that finds all empty buckets in S3 and returns a list of them. That's what I want, right? Because I want something that's more programmatic that I can build off of. So find empty buckets, and now let's see what it helps me build. And this looks, get the number of buckets, find all empty buckets in an account. And There we go. Empty buckets. This is what we want. So let's see. Get the number of buckets. We don't care about that. We can get rid of that. Let's go here. Get the number of buckets. So let's get rid of this one. Create a. We'll get rid of this. This is good. Create an empty list to store the name of the buckets. Here we go. For bucket and buckets, get the number of buckets. Check if the bucket's empty. Print the number of empty buckets. We don't care about that. And this is, we don't care about that. So we do have to be a little bit thoughtful. In how we're creating this. And so we more care about this, right? We more care about just finding the empty buckets. So we first make a list of them. We create first we find all the buckets. Then we make a list to hold empty buckets. Then we walk through all of the buckets that are available. We find the name of the bucket. We look at how many things are inside of the bucket. If the list is empty, then we append that to our empty list, and then we print the names of the empty buckets, and then we return it back. This is exactly what I want. Now, the final check for me when I'm using AI, let's lint. So we'll say make lint. Let's double check that this is good. Unnecessary pass. So let's look at this. We don't. Let's see what happens if I just delete that. Does that work? Because I guess pass is implicit. Yeah. Okay. So we found a small little lint problem, but the code we just wrote is good, and then we can also format. So we can say make format here. There we go. So next, all I need to do is invoke the new function inside of click by making another utility. So then we'll just say this. We'll say create a command to create a command that finds all the empty buckets and returns a list of them. There we go. That's exactly what I want. Find empty buckets. There we go. Look, it's trivial to make because we already built the logic earlier. And in fact, we can even ask for assistance in building the documentation. So we would go through here and we would say like this. And again, I'm going to do manage S3 tools, find bucket, and let's run it out. Let's try it out. So I just grab this here. Let's run it, and it's going to go through my account, and it's going to try to find all of the empty buckets. So it'll take a little bit, right? Because it's got to crawl through all the buckets. It's got to do all kinds of, processing. There we go. Look, the names of the empty buckets are, and it showed me a list of the empty buckets. Now, I do think it would be kind of cool to return a count of the empty buckets as well. And so let's change this code, create a function that finds all the and returns a list of them as well as a count. And so what we'll need to do is do this. There we go. Right. So now we change, in fact, the print statement that says print the number of empty buckets and the names of empty buckets. And so we would just want to change this print statement a little bit. Now, what we could do, we could do this actually. We could just delete it from here. And then we could just add it inside of click, and we could just say something like this. We could say, get all of the empty buckets and so print a count of the empty buckets. Print a count of the empty buckets and the names of each empty bucket in color in the no, we'll just print the names first. Okay, so here we go. You have this many empty buckets in your account, and then and now prints all empty buckets. Line by line. There you go. Print bucket. So that's a little bit better. Here we go. And so now if I run this tool, it should just be a little bit more clean because it'll put first the thing that it did, and then it'll line by line print all of the empty buckets. So you have 13. And then it's going to go through and it's going to line by line. At least it should. There we go. It put all of the different buckets. And it says, this is empty bucket. This is an empty bucket. This is an empty bucket. This is an empty bucket, right? So these are all buckets that, maybe I want to clean up a little bit, and I have a total of 13. So this is useful. I mean, this is definitely stuff that I could actually play around with. Now, what I could do as well is let's go and spot check our tool to make sure it's correct. And so I'm going to go back to my AWS account and look, what does this say? NW May 27. Let's find that. What's in here? Is this truly empty? Yeah, it is empty. So what we could do is we could also build a tool that lets us delete buckets that we don't care about. So let's build that as well. So let's go through here, and I'm going to build another tool, and we'll say create a function that deletes a bucket by a name or a pattern. There we go. So we'll delete it. So that definitely deletes it by a partial name. So let's make it a little more sophisticated. So delete buckets. No, that's not exactly what I want. Let's create a function that deletes all buckets that match a pattern. That's more what I care about, right? We want to actually find, because sometimes buckets are created programmatically that are just obnoxious. And so this would delete both one or many, right? So this is more of like a useful utility. So first, let's read what we see here. So we see create a S3 list. Okay, here's a list of buckets. Find the buckets. If the pattern appears, then go ahead and delete the bucket. Yeah, this is pretty good. This is what I want. So now what we need to do is we need to do the lint tool, and we also need to go through and do the format tool. So I'm going to say make lint. There we go. And then I'm going to say make format. There we go. Perfect. And now I just need to append this as another click subcommand. And so we'll create another one, which is create a subcommand that deletes buckets that match a pattern. Delete buckets. Here we go. So you're gonna have to pass in a pattern for it to delete a bucket. And then here we go. delete all buckets that match a pattern. Look, exactly what I want. Delete. Perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's let's go back to um, the other tool that I created earlier, which will find the empty buckets, and then we can use both tools together, right? So here we go. Perfect. So we've been able to find the empty buckets. There's 13 empty buckets in my account. Next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see a list of all of the empty buckets. There we go. And so now that I know some of those buckets are empty, right? Like this one is just garbage. Like I don't want this anymore. So I just use my delete buckets command. So I can go through here and I can just run this command and find this bucket right here, and we can just delete this bucket. There we go. Deleted bucket. Now, if I want to go through and I want to delete another bucket, so again, my bucket is unique. Well, I don't care if you're unique, you're now gone. There we go. Deleted bucket. And then some of these as well, like that have domain names in them, they could have some special properties, and there could be a reason I want them around. So I won't touch those. And that's why I think it's good to be careful about deleting whole scale things. But in general, we can see here there's some buckets that are empty that we really don't care about. I could just clean up my account, and there we go. So I deleted a few buckets. That's pretty nice. And then I can go back, and this thing should be, if we go back here, it should be in process of being, there we go. The bucket is not found. Excellent. Right. So my tool is already helping me out, and it's solving lots of problems. So another thing that I could do now that I had so much success is I have time for maybe one more utility that I think would be kind of fun to build, which is I have a lot of API gateways as well. So if we go through here, that if I go through API gateway, here we go. I have like a ton of these, like just straggling API gateways. Look at these; they're just everywhere. So what I want to do is I'm pretty sure I want to delete all of them, in fact. And so I'm going to write a tool that helps me manage API gateways. So I had so much success with that. Let's make one more, and we'll make one called manage API gateway. And we'll go through here, .py. Perfect. And let's now go to another tool, and we'll do the same thing, import Boto3. And there we go. Let's say write a function that lists all of the API gateways and the date they were created, right? So let's go ahead and list it. What do we got? So here we go. I've got some nice little helper code here. So create an API gateway. Let's read that. Here's all the API gateways for every API and response. Get the name. Here's the API gateway was created. And I think we can also put a thing that also says print count, print the total number. There we go. Thank you. And then we can say return. We can say return a list of the names of the API gateways. And this return API name for API name. Loop through the API gateways. All API gateways. See if it's smart enough to pick this up. And we'll go through here, return all gateways. And so what we need to do is we need to say all gateways append API. No, we wouldn't want to do this. We wouldn't want to do so you have to be on your toes. You can't just all gateways dot append. There we go. See, you really do want to be on your toes when you're using a tool like this. And again, I'll lint it to just make sure I don't have any bugs in my code. Good. All right. So now again, I said the first thing I would recommend would be to invoke it with Ipython first. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Ipython, and I'm going to first try it out. So I'm going to say from manage API gateway imports list API gateways. And then I'm going to say names is equal to list API gateways, like that. There we go. It says you have 25 API gateways. Now this, we don't want that there. That's annoying, right? We don't want that. We only want that printed once. So we want that at the very end. We want that out of the loop, right? And then we'll start with that. But basically, if I say names, this should be all of the, there we go. There's all my API gateways. So that's good. So now all I need to do is write a command line tool so that we'll use this. So I'm going to exit this real quick. And I'm going to say create click group, create a click group. So I'm going to import click. Go. And then we're going to say, there we go, make this, manage API gateways. Now write a function that deletes all API gateways in the accounts. So there we go. Obviously, you want to make sure you know what you're doing, right? In my case, I don't care because I'm not using any of these. But if you cared about it, you really do want to be careful with something like this. And then I could write command, and we would say basically delete API gateways, and we could add another command that is list API gateways, exactly. So let's list them all, and so we would want to say gateways, and so I have to really understand the code. I can't just blindly do what it tells me, or else I'll write bad code. But I'm going to say for gateway and gateways. There we go. And I'll print out the gateways. And then at the very bottom here, I'm going to say run it. There we go. And now I've got this thing running. Now, I think I do want to add some documentation, right? So I want to say example. Now let's change this. So we'll make this executable as well. Perfect. I'm going to make it do a chmod plus X. Let's say API gateways. There we go. I'll say make lint, double check everything is running. So again, the lint and the format are key because it'll catch AI created bugs for me. There we go, just like this. And then we'll say, okay, build an example of how to use this tool. And so I'm going to say manage API gateway, list gateway, and we'll build another one right here, which is our documentation example / manage delete. So let's first run this one. Which will list all of the API gateways, which again, I personally don't care about. If you do care about it, be careful about running the code. Right, I have a list of them. Right, I have 25. Right, I don't care about these, but now I want to just delete them all. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to run the next command, which deletes all my API gateways because they're just straggling, and I want to clean it up. Uh-oh. So invalid API generator. So we may need a different name here. So what we need to do is we probably need to write a better function. So I'll say, here we go, delete them, see what we come up with. So here we go, get them, delete them. So I think this was the problem, is that I need to swap this out for this. There we go. Delete API gateway. Let's see if we run it again. What happens? Okay, delete API. Oh no. Delete all API gateways. Go delete all. Now let's see what happens. So we found a black hole here when calling delete invalid API identifier found Cloud9 API. So I think we're not getting the right identifier to delete these API gateways. So this code is not yet working, and so we can just basically hold off on that and fix it in the future. So I'm going to get rid of this, and we can just add a note to ourselves in our documentation. Here we can just say FYI, this command line tool manage. In the future, I'll add more functionality to it, like delete. There we go. Perfect. And let's go ahead and lint this. Double check everything works. Make lint. Good. Here we go. Make format. Let's check in. Let's say get status. And I've got a bunch of different tools here. So I'm going to add all these tools. Here we go. Get status again. And we can go ahead and add the S3 manage tool and gateway, a gateway tool. Gateway tool. There we go. And we got this pushed. So what's awesome about this is that I was able to really quickly build two very powerful tools to manage AWS. And so I'm going to do this every week. I'm going to code for an hour on AWS, and who knows how many tools I can build. I'm going to both build management tools, I'm going to build service tools, build full APIs, round trip services, all kinds of stuff here. And so this is just day one, and we'll see what I can build. So hope to see you in the future. All right, talk to you soon.